Hi guys, it is a stormy day here in the collapse of global industrial civilization here in Austin, Texas, as we await some brutal hailstorm to hit us. But we're going to leave Austin, Texas and head down to Australia, where I have the great pleasure of talking to climatologist Andrew Glikson about, we're going to do kind of a climate change roundup of 2018. For those of you not familiar with Andrew Glikson, that is Glikson, his work, I'm going to put a link to an interview I had with Andrew at the beginning of 2018, and I encourage you to listen to that after we finish this interview. Andrew Glikson is an Dr. Andrew Glikson is an earth and paleoclimate scientist, a visiting fellow at the School of Archaeology and Anthropology at Australian National University. He is also an honorary professor at the Centre of Excellence in Geothermal Research in the University of Queensland and is affiliated with the Climate Change Institute and the Planetary Science Institute at Australian National University, and the author of probably hundreds of articles by now, and the books, The Plutocene Blueprints for a Post-Anthropocene Greenhouse Earth. And as you can see in this photograph, he is the author of Evolution of the Atmosphere, Fire, and the Anthropocene Climate Event Horizon. And what we're going to be doing over the next 45 minutes to an hour is we're going to go over to global research, where Andrew does a lot of writing, and we're just going to review some of the articles that he has written in 2018 as kind of a review. So with all that, and no further ado, Andrew Glikson, come on board and say hello to the folks, and then we're just going to dive right into the past year.
Oh, it's good. It's nice to meet you, Sam, and every best for the new year.
Yeah, so for all of us, well, before we dive into earlier in 2018, so it was just the first day of summer in Australia, so give us some first-person reporting from how the summer is shaping up down under.
Yes, well, there have been major fires in northern Queensland, right along the coast, more than 100 bushfires. Fortunately, after about a week or so, the weather changed, but this could have been a sign of things to come. There has been a fire here where I live, but within a few days, our brave firefighters managed to get control over it.
So you're saying since the first day of winter, 5 days ago, there's already been 100 bushfires in Queensland?
Oh, in Queensland it went on for longer than 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
And now the weather has changed there. Here in Canberra, it's 4 or 5 weeks ago. Not as major as in Queensland, but still quite a threat.
Okay, so just a quick peek into. Well, this could set off a whole nother hour. A quick peek into 2019. Is it going to be just more of 2018 going exponential?
Well, I'm afraid that's the story. I mean, the frequency of major weather events has risen from 2000 and let me see. In 2018, compared to 2008, I have to put my glasses on. Right. So, in 2018, the frequency of extreme weather events was 3 times higher than 1980. So this shows you, that's according to the Zurich Climate Monitoring Center. This shows you what's happening, that within 20, almost 40 years, we had more than doubling, almost tripling of the frequency of fires, hurricanes, storms, similar events.
And I expect we'll see more of that in 2019. I can't.
Well, I hope not. I hope not. I hope a miracle can happen and humanity can change its state of mind. But the way things are going.
Okay. Well, what I would like to do, since this podcast will be released on December 30th. What we're going to do, Andrew, is we're going to go over to the main website you write for, which is Global Research, and I'm going to put a link over to Global Research where Andrew has a lot of work and other. It's a great website, not just for Andrew Glikson, but for all sorts of folks. And I'm just going we're just going to graze around on some of the articles that Andrew has written in 2018. And Andrew Glikson is not one of these scientists to bury his head in the sand and be super careful with not being honest, shall we say. He is one honest man. And let's dive right in. Let's pick up with Hothouse Earth, demise of the planetary life support system with a question mark. Give us your definition of the hothouse Earth, what it is, when we're going to get there, and what it's going to look like, and what we're going to do about it.
Well, it's been hot enough here in Australia now, where we have 40 degrees and more higher temperatures in central Australia, in northern Australia. Here it's just below 40. The term hothouse air as well, some people coined it, but to me what Schellenhuber was saying was exactly right. The life support system of the planet, of the biosphere, as it has developed until, well, not very long ago, 40 years ago, has allowed advanced life, mammals and birds and so on, to flourish. Now the extreme change in the composition of the atmosphere is taking us back to previous geological ages, but it's taking us back there at such a speed, at such a rate, where many species might not be able to adapt.
Okay, so I see some of the key points that you were talking about in some of the studies that you were linking your own articles to. Let's see. Climate is heading for a tipping point that could make the planet uninhabitable. It could cause temperatures up to 5 degrees higher, Celsius higher than the pre-industrial averages, and current global efforts to curb emissions are unlikely to prevent this dangerous situation. Is that the carry home message from the...
Not the entire planet. We certainly hope that at least in the poles, in the Arctic or subarctic, temperatures will still stay within the range which allows humans to persist, to survive. Perhaps on hunting on what's left of nature.
But what areas are the planet are you looking at that are going to be just literally from heat waves, not even bringing sea level rise? I mean, just literally where it's going to get too hot for humans to live. Are we talking about the Mideast most likely to be the first one to go?
You're talking about the tropics, the subtropics, even further than that. It depends how far the amplifying feedbacks of the climate change are going to reach. Depends whether we're talking about 2, 3, 4 degrees or higher. but anything above 2 might make life in the subtropics and tropics very difficult indeed. So survival from this point of view of temperatures will have to go towards the poles. You can't go very far in the southern hemisphere, although some islands, Macquarie Island and New Zealand South Island maybe. But in the northern hemisphere, you're talking about Canada and Siberia.
So Canada and Siberia are going to be where humans and everybody else are. I mean, purely with the heat. You said this is all going to start at 2 degrees. So, Andrew Glikson, what is your sense of optimism about the global industrial economy rising to the challenge at this point of doing what it is we need to do to keep temperatures any chance of staying below 2 degrees C, or is that target just completely out the window in your mind?
Yeah. I haven't said that it will start at 2 degrees. It already has started.
Yeah, that's true.
Already has started in a big way. Look at what's happening in California, of course, and the hurricanes in the Caribbean and so on. It has already started well and truly. I mean, the train has left the station. But it's increasing in intensity. And as to tipping point, it's not a very well-defined terms, but it's a stage at which it's a point of no return. It's when the climate has moved beyond a point at which humans can or anything can really return it within the foreseeable future.
Well, have we already hit the point of no return at this point, or is there anything in the toolbox that we could come up with at this point to bring this train back?
Well, now this is the 64 trillion question. I hate to say that there is no way back. It seems to me from everything I know that we are now crossing or perhaps have already crossed the point of no return. However, there is in principle or theory one thing that can be done. If humanity changes its state of mind, what passes for it, and diverts the trillions and trillions which it now is using for war, for the military, or if it diverts it all into global attempts to down the road, suck down as much carbon dioxide as technology will allow. Well, who knows? It may or may not work, but at least it's a chance. It's a chance if people who's interested in saving the planet and most life on the planet are in charge, or will be in charge, then it can be attempted, and, well, one would hope there is a reasonable chance. Other than that, the amplifying feedbacks, and you know what I mean by saying amplifying feedbacks from climate change.
Give us your top. I don't know how many there are now. Give us your top 5 amplifying feedbacks that have you most concerned about us getting to the point of no return.
Well, amplifying feedbacks, first, almost obvious one is from the ice. The ice sheets reflect the radiation, infrared and other wavelengths reflect them back into space. As the ice sheet melts and the Arctic sea ice melts, less reflection and greater absorption by the open water. Then are the warming oceans, but warm by about 1 degree. Warmer water don't contain as much carbon dioxide as cold water. So once again, the sequestration, natural sequestration decreases. Then you get the fires which release carbon dioxide. And, of course, there's demise of much of the vegetation. So you have a number of, and then, of course, the big one I should have mentioned is methane. The release of methane from permafrost in the Arctic, but also other regions, amounts to hundreds of billion tons of carbon. It's already started. So feedback is what activates much of, perhaps most of the climate change. Our emission now is a cumulative emission. What we emit now will make a difference, but not a huge difference. And that's what the problem is with the IPCC and world governments. They talk about reducing emissions, which is of course essential, but just reducing it will not work because it's cumulative. It's already past the point at which it's activated the amplifying feedbacks.
So what I'm hearing you say, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. If we don't figure out the carbon capture and removal, it's basically game over. That this is the point we've reached that humanity is either we bring on this technology like tomorrow, or it's just that's our only chance. Is that what you're?
Well, the technology exists in principle, but has not been tested on the scale capable of removing carbon dioxide in any significant amounts. It's going to come back to money, which means if we spend, and we do spend now, trillions every year, which we do on armaments, on war, and so on, as well as on a whole lot of other things, then if this kind of funding resources are directed towards carbon drawdown, sequestration, what I'd say is there is a chance. I can't say how good the chance is, but there is a chance. If that's not being done, even if they stopped emission of carbon emission tomorrow, the cumulative amount in the atmosphere, which is already, CO2 is 407, then you have methane, which adds up another equivalent of a couple of percent. Then you have nitric oxide. When you put all of them together, it gets just under 500 parts per million equivalent, CO2 equivalent. And that's enough to melt the ice sheets in the longer term. I mean, the melting of the ice sheet already started, but it's accelerating. So it's the ice sheet which keeps up this planet habitable for the life forms, the biosphere, as we have at present, or as we had until, 40 years ago.
Well, I think the last, not 2018 isn't over yet. One of the last bad news stories of 2018 was the accelerating pace of the Arctic ice sheets. It was getting a lot of play right during those COP24. What is your response to that? I mean, what was it like? Some of the seas up there are already ice-free, and I mean, some unbelievable amount of the old ice, wasn't it like over 90% of the old thick ice is gone already?
Yes, it's only thin ice, the sea ice, of course, when you compare it with the continental ice on Greenland and especially Antarctic. Antarctic contains most of the ice, global ice. I think in total it's more than 90%. But it's mostly the loss of the albedo of the reflectance. Yeah. And it's been estimated that the loss of the reflectance albedo of the Arctic ice now and once it goes completely is almost equivalent to the effect of the entire carbon dioxide emitted to date. But it's a feedback, you see. That's not where it started. What started it is the emission. Now the emission has driven so much of the Arctic ice to go, which is a feedback. And it seems that people, the media, politicians, even the IPCC, have been underestimating the feedback and keep on talking about just the emissions. The emissions is what started it, but now it's gained its own momentum. They keep talking about as if they can arrest global warming at some point, 1.5 or 2 or whatever. They can't, because it's not caused only by emissions. Global warming not caused only by emissions. It started with emissions, but now it's caused by all the amplifying factors.
Yeah, I think that this is what a lot of people are confused about, including a lot of people I seem to be interviewing. That, as you say, they keep centering on that word emissions. They're talking about these carbon capture and removal balancing out everything that goes up. We just suck back out, but you have to make it much bigger than that, especially with this methane. I mean, we got to start now pumping methane methane capture and storage. I've never heard that term mentioned. So I think that's what you're driving at. That it's an even bigger challenge than most people realize.
Well, you see, the whole issue of global warming has been hijacked by economists, by politicians, by various other people who really hardly understand the processes in the atmosphere. Now, let me give you an example which will be really to the point.
Okay.
This is medical science. A group of oncologists, top doctors, identify a cancer in the system. There are various symptoms on the surface, like various expressions on the skin and so on. And they try and convince the patient to stop smoking. But the patient is addicted to smoking, just the way that we are addicted to fossil fuels. Come the media, the politicians, the economists, and try and deal with the whole issue in terms of money. How much will it cost to X, Y, Z? Well, and they leave the doctors, they leave the specialists, they leave the surgeons on one side. So the whole issue is becoming, it becomes commercial. How much can we spend? What do we need to spend and when? Not to the point at all. Totally off the point. If they brought the scientists back to all these panels, into governments, into these decision-making bodies, the scientists, the doctors, the oncologists, the brain surgeons could have told them something. Could have told them something which needs to be done. That's what climate scientists are trying to say to the authorities. But they don't listen. They listen less and less. I find myself, it's almost impossible now to get climate change papers and articles into the mainstream media. And this is the reality that we are living in.
So, I mean, obviously 2018 was probably the single most glaring example of everything you just said with, what are we, COP24. So the IPCC comes out, which with that, I mean, for them, their scariest report ever, their most honest report ever, and even, of course, I did not think it went far enough, but it was still, for the IPCC, a pretty bold step to open up these COP24 meetings, which were let's face it, they were a joke. And as all of that bumbling was going on, they had all that new stuff about how the Arctic ice was in melt overdrive. Give us your opinion of that IPCC report and how COP24 responded to it. And are you just as disgusted as I am by that whole dog and pony show over there?
The IPCC is based on thousands of peer-reviewed science papers, which are excellent. It's based on the best evidence we ever have. However, when it comes to the summary for policymakers, which is mostly what the media and politicians and so on read, this has been watered down and watered down and watered down. The other thing, the IPCC summaries have made a huge mistake in that error, in that they have plotted out the temperature rise curve to the end of the century and even to 2300 as linear or somewhat curved trajectories. If anyone who looks at the behavior and history of the atmosphere sees that this is unreal, this is absolute nonsense. The atmosphere does not behave in such long-term linear ways. when changes in temperature and composition occur at the rate at which they're occurring now, it's bound to reach some critical points, tipping points. And in fact, Hansen, at an earlier stage, no one can say exactly what year, but sooner rather than later. Now, James Hansen and his very large group of scientists, climatologists, paleoclimatologists, who is, to me, they are the authority. They are the true authority on climate change. And they have not been participating in the IPCC for some reason. Anyway, they have presented projections which show that this extreme heating and melting of ice is going to result in, I'm going to come with a term that's not familiar to everybody, it's going to result in stadials. Stadial is a temporary transient cooling, freezing, consequent on the flow of ice meltwater. In particular, we're talking here about Greenland. There is already a very large, regional large cold region, cold water region in the North Atlantic, immediately south and southeast of Greenland. This is that's been identified by some climate scientists, but particularly by the Germans. This is a sign that we could be moving towards a stadia, which means a regional freeze. Now, stadias have occurred naturally in the past because of melting of cap ice. But this time, of course, it will be once again a feedback to carbon emissions. As a result, there will be I cannot see that there will be a linear growth in temperature. It's growing and accelerating, but then there will be a break, and there will be very sharp cooling in some regions in the Atlantic, and possibly in some regions around the Antarctic. But then warming will continue because of the high carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Wow. So it's not good news. It's not good news. It will result in the polarization of temperatures across the globe. They're still very cold poles, but they are warming cold poles, but also cold part of the northern oceans. And in contrast, the continents, interior of the continents, the northern continents will continue to heat, which results in storms.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Just trying to follow the logic of all that, but obviously the IPCC is not is just conveniently not talking about this. Now, do you believe? Now, the mainstream media was really, I have to give them a little bit of credit. I don't give them credit very often, but I give them a little bit of credit on when that IPCC report was released. But they were making it sound like that it was, particularly terrifying. You see what I'm saying? And I was reading it that it was that I don't think it was terrifying enough. Do you follow the mainstream media's interpretation, or are you more in line with the way I'm reading it?
I don't believe the mainstream media has been or is now telling the truth of the whole story. They pick snippets of what the IPCC is saying from right, left, and center. And the people who write it, the journalists, are not familiar enough with the principle of climate science. Once again, I'll come back to the brain surgeons. Imagine that there are patients who have brain cancer, and all the oncologists and specialists are working on them, and the media is floating around and picking up bits and pieces of information. That's what it is. Yeah. It's been taken away. The issue has been taken away from the scientists. Not that all scientists see things exactly in the same way. There are variations between what scientists say. A lot of scientists are so overwhelmed by what's happening, the magnitude of it, the effects on their own life and the life of the children, that there are psychological effects. Even scientists very often, very commonly, I'd say many of them, maybe most, find it very difficult to come to terms with the whole story, so let alone stand in public and communicate it. But I feel, and some of my colleagues feel, it's our duty to tell the science as it is, the best science we're aware of. We're not aware of everything. There are things which we don't know, especially when you look at the future. But we are looking at the essential trends, which are daunting.
But however you want to interpret the IPCC report, how would you characterize the response of the COP24 UN meeting this year in Poland as a response to the handwriting on the wall? Was anything accomplished at all at the climate talks this year, or was it just a complete waste of time and jet fuel flying all those people to Poland and back?
These people are well-meaning, and many of them, or most of them, understand what's happening. Even though only some of them are climate scientists, the other ones also understand the principle. But they have no power. What they decide is non-binding. And essentially, since the United States has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement and so on, I mean, let's face it, the world is an empire. And if the forces at the top of the empire are not willing to do anything about this catastrophe, then the other countries are not in a very good position. Yeah. So these conferences in Paris and in Poland, the decisions are non-binding. So what can you say?
Well, what can you say? What do you have to say about the climate talks? Just did it accomplish anything at all this year, or did it just? It seems to me like it almost just gave ammunition to the people laughing about climate change alarmists.
Well, the people who are laughing at this now, their children will not be laughing, I'm afraid. So it's one of those paradoxes that to get people, including some scientists or pseudo-scientists, who quite a few of them get support from the fossil fuel industry, gives you a clue. And other ones, well, it's an opportunity to get their name in the headlines. I see these people as committing criminal acts.
Yeah, no, that's one of your articles. I think what the crimes against the planet, just straight ahead.
Yeah.
What are the? I have mentioned this article already. I've gone over it, but for people who missed that, crimes against the earth. Just run with that. What do you see as some of the? By crimes, you are implying intent on the part of the criminals. That it's not just an accidental byproduct of global industrial civilization what is happening, but it actually implies criminal intent. What's happening? Would you?
Well, it's unintended, originally unintended, but now that the bulk of the science, in fact, basically all of the science, indicates what the consequences are of saturating the atmosphere with carbon dioxide. It's very much like the well poisoning phenomenon in the Middle Ages, when the courts, people who poison wells, well, you know what they've done to them. But now, some people can poison the atmosphere and become rich in the process. What can you say? The world is almost defenseless. I've explored legal means. I talked with lawyers and so on about what can be done, and of course many other people did that, like James Hansen and so on. But the lawyers tell you that, well, what you can get fined if you cross the streets at an undesignated point. The people who are progressively poisoning our atmosphere are immune from justice. There are no laws written. There are laws which prohibit people from putting up local rubbish fire on their own backyard. But there are no laws against industries which are emitting well, hundreds of billions of tons of carbon, which is endangering life on Earth.
Yep. So that certainly qualifies as a crime. I mean, I'm just going down the list of crimes in 2018. I just want to. I'm just thinking of some of the news stories of 2018 that I want to get your comment on. Well, I guess surely you've heard that I think it was right about the time the IPCC released that report and the climate talks were starting is when they announced for the first time in human history we were now pumping 100 million barrels of oil out of the planet every day of the week for the first time ever. Did you read that news, and what is your takeaway from that news?
Yeah, well, that's right. It's a gradual development. It started in a big way, huge way since World War II. And that's significant because this was the deadliest war with 70 million killed, and also the deadliest in the long term through its effects on the atmosphere and the oceans. I mean, hydrocarbons are toxins. When they saturate the atmosphere and the oceans and the water, then life on Earth suffers. In a way, suffers perhaps similar to what happened on the Permian-Triassic boundary, although we're not quite clear about what happened then. But there has been global poisoning then. There is a global poisoning happening now. And these merchants of death, I call them that, they seem to be immune. They are in government. Governments act as their mouthpieces. What happens, ordinary people, some people have understood it. And of those people who have understood it, some resist it and some have become active. Here in Australia, even school children have been marching. But not enough people understand or are willing to do anything about it. If you look at the people who go to sports events and festivities and so on, you look at them and think, how many of them worry about the fate of the planet?
Yep. So you're not surprised. You see no reason for surprise that we're pumping 100 million barrels of oil per day for the. Yeah. Do you see that figure just going right on up? I mean, at what point are we going there? Is this whole notion of decarbonizing the global industrial economy? What is your sense of optimism on the global industrial economy actually decarbonizing?
I think, Sam, you already have picked up my sense of optimism or otherwise. So this is a rhetoric question.
Yeah, pretty much at this point, Andrew, it is. So you don't think it's going to happen?
No, I can only see one possible, hopefully possible, practical line of defense.
Okay.
For the biosphere. And that's one which requires humans, the human species, to change its attitude 180 degrees. Stop playing all these war games, killing each other as if this is the answer for anything, quite apart from the immoral dimension. And divert these trillions towards a major, serious attempt, and I emphasize the word attempt, to draw down the poison that we have been pouring into the atmosphere. Now, carbon dioxide is not poison at a certain level. The same as some metals. If you have some nanograms of arsenic or cadmium or zinc in your bloodstream, you will survive. But when it exceeds a certain threshold, it becomes poison. And what we're doing, and this is where I will say quite deliberately, we are poisoning the atmosphere and the oceans. The atmosphere is becoming, beyond a certain point, if carbon dioxide levels increase, you get a condition called hypercapnia. Hypercapnia is a level of carbon dioxide that will kill you. You only at 2,000 parts per million, which it could reach in a slightly longer term. It could reach at the rate it's going. The other thing, of course, the acidification of the ocean, which is killing marine life. Well, what more can one say except that our species and our civilization is poisoning nature and the world we're living in?
That the evidence for that is pretty much incontrovertible at this point. It was just a few days ago. Have you been reading that? These studies where 50% of the plankton in the last 4 years in a lot of study areas, that 50% of the ocean plankton is just gone, has just collapsed in the last 4 years, and talking about scientists scratching their heads why this could be. Well, why do you think?
Well, it just takes one person, of course, and not only one, but one at the top, like the American president, to say that he doesn't believe it, he thinks it's just a Chinese conspiracy, and the rest of the world will just go over the cliff. That's all it takes.
Yeah. Well, speaking of bogeymen that showed up in 2018, I say I'm just going down my list of stories that I'm going to be covering in my own list here. The day after I put this interview with you out there, can you? I want to talk to you just a moment, because on January 1st we have this monster named Jair. I call him Bolsonaro. This guy Bolsonaro, who is now in charge of the Amazon rainforest. Are you following that story about this guy? And
yeah, yes, I'm afraid. I read from the media that he has got great plans for the Amazon, basically to cut trees and establish more farming on this land. But, this goes to these people, well, the fascists really, they don't look or care about life as such. What they do is the opposite. And this happens on various levels, whether it's through wars or ethnic cleansing, through deforestation, through dumping of toxin. I mean, it's a part of, I call it fascism. I don't have a better word for it. It should be better words. But the people who are operating against life, and then there are those people who try and rescue or defend life. But at the moment, it's not the majority.
Yeah, this Bolsonaro, man, he's just emblematic. I mean, he out-trumped Donald Trump, and I mean the fact that this man is in charge of of what people call the lungs of the planet. What is your reading of how important is the Amazon rainforest to the global climate if a worst case scenario happens and the Amazon goes down, as more and more people are claiming it will? What will that alone mean? Not just the tragedy on the ground in South America, but what will it mean to people in Australia and Peoria, Illinois, if we lose the Amazon rainforest?
Well, the Amazon has been described many times as the lungs of the earth, or the lungs of the atmosphere, because of the oxygen that it releases. And in projections of global warming, it has been taken into account, not so much by land clearing, but by fires.
Yeah.
Fires. And if, and as it looks now, it is in danger now, and it could go, well, it's a synergy of all the factors coming together. This is when people talk about tipping points, well, they don't normally really know what they're talking about, but it's a synergy of the ice sheet melting, of methane released from the permafrost, of fires, of forest fires, and the Amazon, and of course other factors, it's a synergy of all of these processes, but how and when it will come together at any particular point in time, that we do not know. We can forecast trends, but we can't forecast the time and place of specific events.
Yeah, that's what of course, listeners to a channel with the name of Collapse Chronicles, that is always the big question is when. And, when is this going to, the Blue Ocean event is one of the big ones. When is this event and this event? But, obviously, by 2050, this planet is going to be looking a lot different than it does here in 2018. And we're going to just figure out what we're going to do about that. So,
well, you probably have been reading about the mass extinction events. I've written about it too. Well, it has been described as a mass extinction by biologists, by the World Fund for Wild Nature Fund, and among many, many other ones.
Yeah.
When you have a loss of species at the present rate, which is somewhere on the order of between 1,000 species to 10,000 species per year. When you have a loss on this rate, which is not just because of climate change, it's because of many other factors, especially land clearing and the use of herbicides and toxins of one kind or another. When you look at nature as a whole, and there is any number of papers about it, it has been now defined by biologists and botanists as a mass extinction event, and we're a part of it, because ultimately we depend on nature, even though there are people who believe that we can live in some sort of underground capsules or go to Mars or whatever.
So clearly, by 2050, anybody trying to deny that we are in a mass extinction event, it's going to be. Is anybody going to be able to deny that in a few more years?
Well, you can trust those people who lie to say that it's a natural event. You can trust them to always pull out some sort of red herrings. So what they say doesn't count now and will not count at any time. It's nature bets last, as you know very well. The phrase nature bets last. They can say whatever they say. They've already proven to be lying. They are contradicting the basic laws of physics. They're contradicting direct observations. They're contradicting the whole science of climatology. And they are being paid, by the benefactors. So it's not as if we want to take too much notice of what they say. What they say, what they do is criminal, and I think it has to be identified as such. But the tragedy is that many people, or perhaps most people, don't quite understand, and those who understand feel powerless.
Well, talk about that. The feeling of feeling powerless. You mentioned a few minutes ago about how you're seeing more and more climatologists and probably any other scientists looking at the natural world just getting more and more just depressed. I mean, beyond alarmed that they just realize they're fighting a losing battle. Do you ever, in your own life, do you just ever think, why am I doing this with my life?
Well, if you ask me why I'm doing it, I feel I need to answer to my own conscience. It's something to do with being true to yourself, and also your duty as a scientist. But the development is so overwhelming that, yes, I have been thinking about it a lot. In the final account, what's happening now is a product of civilization having invented, or humans having invented, such a plethora of methods and tools and techniques, all the way from TNT to the nuclear there is electromagnetic devices and change of the climate, or by combustion. That humans are not really perhaps wise and strong enough. They don't have the sense of responsibility developed, mature to an extent which can develop, arrest or limit the application or misapplication of these powers. So it's something inherent in human nature, inherent in history. I have written about it. If you have some of these books, you will get chapters in my Climate, Fire and Human Evolution, and also the Plutocene book. You will get chapters concerned with these questions.
But you don't blame climatologists and other natural scientists for feeling overwhelmed and depressed, surely?
Oh, many try their best. Many try their best. But there is something which is counterintuitive in talking about, the demise of nature and civilization as we know it. I mean, I'm not saying that's the end. I'm not saying that's the end of the world. I've never said that. I'm not saying it now. There could always be survivors in some parts of the world, hopefully. But what I'm saying is that the issue is overwhelming to the extent that even psychologically and emotionally, not everyone can cope with it, including scientists. But many can. I mean, you get people such as Michael Mann and James Hansen, just to quote two names, who are doing their utmost best and doing marvelously well. And I'm full of admiration for these people.
Okay. Well, I noticed, man, we are already past 52 minutes, so we got to wrap up in just a little bit. Now, in the discussion we had last year, again, folks, I'm going to put a link to that interview from a year ago. We talked more. We talked a lot more at length, but Andrew is also very involved in the anti-nuclear movement, the anti-nuclear weapon movement, as well as his climate work. And I wish we had had time to explore that. But I do want to get your prediction, the doomsday clock. I believe, are we didn't it get moved to 2.5 minutes? Do you feel like the doomsday clock is going to stay where it is, get closer to midnight, or farther away here in early 2019?
These people who decide where to set the hours of the clock, they are physicists and chemists, and they are some of the most knowledgeable people in the United States especially. They don't play with the clock for no reason. Whether I think that it's going to get closer, I don't know how close it's going to get, but all I can say is what I said before, the train has left the station.
So you will not be surprised if it moves closer?
I am heartbroken. Surprise is not the word.
Yeah.
I am and have been for years and years, first with the nuclear issues and with the climate, heartbroken. But let's just say, if you spend enough time in the water, you don't feel wet any longer.
Yep. So when do they set that clock? And isn't it about a month from now? I think. Anyway,
Well, I think it's 2.5. But they have meetings of the committee of the bulletin of the atomic scientists, and they discuss the world situation not only with the climate. Climate is a huge factor. They also talk about the possibility of nuclear war. Global politics comes very much into it. In fact, the possibility, the likelihood is that some nuclear events, whether it's peaceful or not so peaceful, might well happen much before the worst of the climate catastrophe takes over.
yeah, that is a subject for an entirely different. I could launch into that for another hour with you, but I cannot believe that we have already running up against an hour. So just as I closed our last interview, and I close all of my interviews, let me do it again. So you should be used to this question. Andrew Glikson, if you were not talking to Sam Mitchell from Collapse Chronicles on YouTube, but we're actually had a mainstream media microphone in your face, and you had a 60-second soundbite here in the waning days of 2018 to send your message out to the planet, what would that 60 seconds sound like to wrap up this fine conversation?
Yes, I wasn't sure whether you were asking me a question.
Yeah, what if you had 60 seconds to tell the mainstream media what your message to the world is here at the end of 2018? What would your 60-second message to the world sound like?
My message can only be in terms of the way I myself can cope. The way I cope, I live one day at a time. I try to, while doing my science to the best of my ability, I try not to completely overwhelm my own life, and that's by living one day at a time. And I wish to every person that they be able to do that, and if they can resist the current trend in any way, shape or form, good on them. I really like to encourage them to do all they can. There is an answer in terms of carbon dioxide drawdown, but whether humanity or the powers to be will apply this chance, who knows?
Okay, well, one day at a time. That's all. That's all we've got, and that's why I always wrap up my own videos with get out there and enjoy it while you still can. And once again, Andrew Glikson, we really appreciate you taking an hour out of your busy schedule for this interview. And I want to tell people I'm going to put the link to his excellent, there's a whole series of articles here on global research, and anyone trying to understand what's going on with the climate here at the end of 2018 simply needs to go read what this man has written in 2018 in global research, and you're a long way to better understanding it. But Andrew Glikson, we really appreciate the good fight you are fighting, and hopefully.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Sam. I really appreciate your efforts in communicating our situation, and all the very best to you for 2019. I'm sorry about the telephone trouble we had.
Oh, no problem. We made it. That's all that matters. Well, this camera is getting ready to turn off, so I am simply going to say, Andrew Glikson, thank you very much, and hopefully we will talk to you again at the end of 2019 to see where we stand as a planet. So onward to 2019. Andrew Glikson, thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you, Sam. Thank you.
Bye, guys.